Hello, I'm Iqbal and welcome to the Theek Thak podcast brought to you by the Sikh Welfare Council, also known as SIWEC. In Punjabi, Theek Thak means all well or all good. It's common to ask people if everything is Theek Thak when we meet them. In this podcast series, we want to take what it means to be all well and all good seriously. We want to focus on an aspect of our health that we often don't pay enough attention to and very often don't know how to pay attention to. I'm referring to mental health. Now, I'm not an expert on issues related to mental health, but I have a number of questions and I'm eager to learn. In this podcast series, I will be speaking with a number of experts. Over the coming weeks, experts will discuss issues ranging from mental health issues that we face as a community to stress amongst the youth. We will also discuss resources that are available to all of us. Today's episode will be on dementia, and we'll be speaking with Stephen Chan, who is the Director of Care Services at Dementia Singapore. Stephen Chan has spent 20 years in the field of dementia care. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Theek Thak. Every 3 seconds, someone in the world develops dementia. Yet, there are a number of misconceptions about this condition, and there needs to be more awareness about what an individual who has dementia is going through, but also the help and resources that are available for the caregivers. So I'm delighted to have Stephen Chan, who is the Director of Care Services at Dementia Singapore, joining us today to speak about dementia and to explain the conditions of dementia, the symptoms, but also the resources and the ways in which caregivers can reach out for help when they're dealing with somebody who has the condition. So, Stephen, thank you for joining us today. As is customary on the Theek Thak podcast, we offer chai, and I hope you get to enjoy a bit of it while we are having the conversation.
Yeah, I'm enjoying myself.
Stephen, can I start by asking you to maybe talk to us about, tell us a little bit about your own journey, because I understand you have been in the field of dementia for 20 years in various capacities. So tell us about how you came into this field and what exactly do you do?
Yeah, I started off as an occupational therapist working in a daycare center. And after a while, in a daycare center, not typical dementia daycare center, and then the organization that I was working in was acquired by Alzheimer's Disease Association. That is when, during the transition period, they introduced dementia care. Initially, I have some misconception about dementia. We thought that dementia, there is nothing much you can do about dementia. But ever since, the organization that took over where I was working as an occupational therapist, I learned more and more about dementia. The more I learn, the more I think that I don't know about dementia. And there are so much we can do for the person with dementia and to help caregiver to improve their lives and their journey across the trajectory of disease. So I started off as an occupational therapist. Then I became assistant manager and managed a dementia daycare center for, I think, more than 10 years. Then I moved to caregiver support, where under Alzheimer's Disease Association, we also provide some home-based support. We send professionals to the home to help caregivers to better support their loved one with dementia or manage conditions that is difficult to manage. Then later on, I become Director of Care Services, overseeing all the services. So here I am now.
Yes. And I'm delighted that you're here with us. Can you tell us a little bit more about Dementia Singapore?
Yeah, and like what I mentioned just now, Dementia Singapore was known as Alzheimer's Disease Association. And we were set up, this organization is a non-profit organization, was set up in the 1990s. It's about 30 over years old organization. And this organization provides a lot of dementia support services. And we are not a big organization. We have 200 strong staff. And then we have various support services ranging from center-based to home-based, and then some community support services for caregivers, or even to reach out to general public to educate them about dementia, and then so that we reduce a lot of misconception about dementia. So again, then we changed our name in 2021, if I'm not wrong. Sorry, 2020. Yeah, 2021, we changed our name to Dementia Singapore. So I think my memory is a bit fuzzy working in Dementia Singapore. 2021 or 2022. Then we changed our name to Dementia Singapore. The reason being that the dementia is a broad term. And then the services that we provide serve different types of dementia, and not only Alzheimer's type, although Alzheimer's is the most prominent one. But then that's why, this is a worldwide movement. Alzheimer's Australia become Dementia Australia. It's more representative. Similarly with us, Alzheimer's disease Singapore become Dementia Singapore, and then we don't like the word disease.
Yes.
Yeah, disease is quite have a very negative tone to it. Yeah.
I must jump in here and say that you describe yourself as a small organization. You're doing great work, and you're doing very important work, not just in helping caregivers and individuals who have the condition of dementia, but also in creating awareness about dementia.
Yeah.
And with regards to awareness, let me start with a broad question here. For many of us out there who don't understand exactly what this term means, we are hearing it much more now. What is dementia? How would you define dementia?
I think first and foremost, dementia is actually a disease process that's happening in the brain. There's some changes to the brain structure that bring about some signs and symptoms. I think a lot of people will associate dementia with memory loss, and then it's true. Memory loss is one of them. Disorientation, a lot of people cannot tell, what is the time, what is their age, or where they are now. Disorientated to time, place, and person. That create a lot of psycho-emotional issues like anxiety, where am I? How am I going to get back? And then it's a disease process, and then it deteriorates over time. And then if you look under some brain scans, actually the healthy brain compared to dementia brain, the dementia brain shrink significantly, and then give rise to a lot of signs and symptoms. Like what I mentioned, the memory loss, disorientation. Some people even have hallucination. They see things, they hear things, and a lot of them have paranoia ideation. Where's my wallet? Somebody steal my wallet. Actually, they victimize a lot of their loved one, or a domestic helper, or their in-laws, or daughter-in-law. She's no good, she always take my things. But there's a lot of paranoia ideation. Actually, it's oftentimes it may not be real. Yeah.
And if I can develop on that, actually, you mentioned that there are types of dementias.
Yeah. I mean, they are, like what I mentioned, dementia is a umbrella term. It's a very broad term. Under the broad term of dementia, you have specific types, and then the specific types, there's reasons for it. The biggest type that causes dementia is Alzheimer's disease. That's why you often hear about Alzheimer's disease, and then the signs and symptoms are very similar to the rest of the subtype of dementia, but the causes of it may be different. So Alzheimer's disease is one, the major type, and then there are one type that is more prominent in Singapore, that is vascular dementia. This is due to, sometimes we don't take care of our health, and then there is small little blockage in the arteries that is happening in the brain, right? And then give rise to signs and symptoms of dementia. And then you have Lewy body dementia, and even you have names such as alcohol-induced dementia, and Parkinson dementia, and then there's many subtypes of dementia. Yeah, but I think generally people know Alzheimer's disease.
Alzheimer's, yes,
Yeah.
I think that's This is particularly useful because I think one of the apart from misconceptions about dementia, one of the things that I suspect happens is that sometimes dementia gets underplayed as well or brushed off as just aging, forgetfulness, and people maybe don't really deal with it in their families or in their communities. And I think one follow-up question on that I'd be curious to hear about is that there must be stages to dementia. Are there sort of stages that you could define for us?
Stages of dementia, right? It's a progressive disease where you have early, moderate, and advanced stage of dementia. At the early stage, the person is relatively independent, but the memory loss is prominent until it impaired on the activities of daily living, meaning that any deviation to the normal routine, the person will have difficulty functioning independently, and this will be more progressive as the disease progress, and especially the memory loss part, where the person become more and more repetitive. And then the independence, the person will be more and more dependent, in other words, on others in order to be functioning on a daily basis. For example, the person may not be able to make a cup of Milo by himself, or may not remember to bathe, may not remember whether he or she has eaten. And come a point in time that identifying their loved one will be difficult for this person with dementia. But when it comes to the late stage, the person dependency will increase significantly. Come a point in time at the very advanced stage of dementia, the person lose the ability to even move the hand and leg. So the psychomotor skills will be affected, and at very advanced stage, the person will not be able to even to sit up by himself or herself. Need to be supported. So this is the progression of dementia. But having said that, a lot can be done to support this person to live well with dementia.
Before we speak about the support, can I ask you, what are the causes of dementia?
There are various causes. Alzheimer's disease, there is some, in a very layman terms, there is some plaques that is happening in the brain. And tangles that is happening in the brain, and this is not normal part of aging. And you know that our brain is like trillions of electrical impulses that is connecting with one another, and then this electrical impulses is impaired in the disease process due to this plaque and tangle. This is Alzheimer's type of dementia. And then the other one is easier, that is easier to understand, is vascular dementia, where due to usually unhealthy lifestyle, like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and constant stress, that give rise to some, I would say, mini stroke that's happening in the brain. But because there is some blockage in the blood vessels that is happening in the brain, but these blockages is happening at the edge of the blood vessels. So it's not so prominent. You won't see that the person had very glaring movements difficulty like a person with major stroke. But it's happening in a lot of places. It's happening in the brain, and then give rise to dementia, the memory loss, disorientation, sometimes even difficulty recalling words, remembering who are their loved ones, word finding difficulties. It really depends on what type of dementia. Another one that is one of the most easy to explain is alcohol-induced dementia. It comes from drinking too much. That causes damage to the brain and then give rise to signs and symptoms of dementia.
Listening to you, I'm realizing that when it comes to early stages of dementia, there could be a lot of, I hope not a lot, but there could be people out there who are having early stages of dementia but are not aware of.
Actually, it's true. in Dementia Singapore, we have this program called post-diagnostic support. So we put in the support as soon as they are being diagnosed. And then we spoke to some of the geriatrician, memory clinic. There's working in memory clinic where the diagnosis is happening. They call it specialist outpatient clinic. So what happened is that very senior doctor told me where she run the clinic, 50% of them at the early stage of dementia, 40% at the moderate stage of dementia, and then 10% at the late stage, advanced stage of dementia. Then, like what you mentioned just now, there's a lot of people go on undiagnosed. And these are people who get diagnosis, but there are a group of people, even at the very advanced stage of dementia, they are not diagnosed with dementia. Not only happening to those who are in the early stage, even for the moderate and late stage, it happened to them as well.
And how do you diagnose dementia?
I think the first cut is you notice something is amiss. Like, this person, tend to forget keys. I mean, everybody forget where they place their keys. But then the forgetfulness is so prominent until it impair the daily function of the person. Like, for example, the forgetfulness is so prominent until the person cannot go to the same NTUC where he or she frequent to and come back. The person on the way there may get lost or buy wrong things or miscalculated the amount to pay, things like that. It impair on the daily routine of the person.
And another question that I had, and I'm sorry for my ignorance, but this is why I like to talk to people who are experts. Dementia, often, I think people like myself would assume that it affects people who are older.
Yeah.
But is that necessarily the case that it's only older people who get dementia?
I come across somebody who are 39 years old diagnosed with dementia, and then there are people who are in the 40s and 50s diagnosed with dementia. Typically above the age of 65 years old, they are diagnosed with dementia. But then whoever that is diagnosed at below the age of 65, there is a term for it. We call it young onset dementia. And then neuroscience, National Neuroscience Institute, in short NNI, are the one usually diagnose people with young onset dementia. And this is actually something that is getting more and more prominent. People who are younger getting the diagnosis. I mean, we can speculate maybe it's due to their awareness. These are signs and symptoms. And then in the past, maybe they don't even thought of dementia, but because of that awareness, think that maybe memory loss, maybe I go and see a doctor, and then think about dementia. So then there are increasingly more and more people getting diagnosis at a younger age.
And then thanks to the great work that people like yourself are doing to create awareness in Singapore about dementia. And I know you won't want to take any credit, but credit where credit is due. Again, just coming back to the signs of dementia again, and now you mentioned that younger people are also susceptible to this condition as well and may not be aware of it. Are there any symptoms that we should look out for? I know you mentioned about forgetting the keys and TUC, etc. But for many of us, that's also sort of...
For young people, it's a bit tricky because when they have some impaired judgment or due to memory loss, disorientation, dementia is not the first in mind. Usually they think that, maybe I have some thyroid problem or blood condition, infection, or some other diseases that give that look like dementia, and then they usually go around getting a lot of investigation done to exclude other condition, even under very rare condition, and then go one big round, and then go through a lot of pain and take very long time. Finally, then even the medical professional will think of other things first, but not dementia. At the end of it, they did the blood test and then whatever scan, realize that it's dementia. It is more difficult to diagnose a person who are younger with dementia. And then it's not only person who are younger, they are caregiver as well. Caregiver, I mean their loved one, and then especially they are at the younger age, right? They are wondering what happened to their loved one, why so forgetful, not like before, unable to keep their job. And it's particularly difficult, and then they are sandwiched between, they don't have not at the retirement age where they have a pot of gold or some saving to last them through, and then they still have younger kids to take care of, and then they are still paying for their mortgages. And this group of people actually, they are facing more stress than, in my opinion, than typical dementia.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned the caregivers, this was another topic I wanted to discuss. What sort of challenges do you come across for those who are caring for people with dementia? What are some of the key challenges they face?
I think it depends. It depends because in Dementia Singapore, we always advocate a person-centered approach. Every individual diagnosed with dementia are unique. Hence, the approach adopted by caregiver on the person with dementia will varies from person to person. At the very early stage, I urge caregiver equip themselves with skills and knowledge, understand the trajectory of dementia, know how to support their loved one, and then support is not in terms of whether they take medication on time, whether they are clean or not, whether they bathe on time or not. Support in terms of looking at some of the psycho-emotional issue of their loved one, whether the person with dementia is it has that sense of well-being. Although diagnosed with dementia, it can happen, and the way caregiver communicate, the way caregiver design the activity to engage their loved one meaningfully. At the early stage, the person with dementia is relatively independent, but they may need more structure to get through the day. And then the structure has to be healthy. And in generally, biopsychosocial, you must have a balance of cognitive activity, social activity, and some physical activity. And then the person feel I live, I'm engaged, I'm well engaged throughout the day, and then I rest well. It's when the caregiver at this stage, they don't know how to engage their loved one, and then be overly protective, cannot do this, cannot do that, and then there's a lot of psycho-emotional issues that is happening in their loved one with dementia. And then usually, we term this as unmet needs. And then when unmet needs happen, the person will have frustration, the person with dementia will have frustration, and then will lash out on their loved one with dementia because the caregiver is not equipped with skills and knowledge how to engage the person with dementia properly. But come to a moderate stage, there's a lot. This unmet needs is even more prominent. And then because at the moderate stage, a person with dementia may not be able to tell what is right or what is wrong. And then, but the emotion is still very strong. If I'm frustrated, I'll bang the table. If I think that I need to go to work, you lock me up, and then I'll bang the door, and then I'll yell and shout. Whoever locked the door usually are the caregivers, right? And this causes a lot of stress in caregivers. And then they need to, know how to react to the situation. For example, if a person with dementia say, I need to go to work. It's time already. My boss is waiting for me. I'll be late in the meeting. Then if the caregiver is very confrontational, says that, you have stopped work. You have got dementia. It has been so many years. You are not able to go to work. There's no work for you. And then the guy get more angry. But if the caregiver know how to interact, you want to go to work? What happened? Your boss is waiting for you. And then tell me more about your boss. And then I strike a conversation. And then after a while, that the person with dementia forgot that he need to go to work. And then can via distraction. But what happened is the caregiver address the emotion of the person with dementia first, rather than the fact, because the fact doesn't matter to the person with dementia. And then come to very late stage is a lot of physical handling, like, bathing, cleaning, transfer. So then the transfer techniques and all these things. Having said all this, there is a lot of community support and resources, community programs to support caregivers. Because ultimately, as the disease progresses, the person with dementia is more and more reliant on the caregiver. So if the caregiver cannot cope, the person with dementia have to go to a nursing home or institution.
And this is a fascinating point you've raised about how to address the emotional need first rather than the fact itself. Now, as a caregiver, who wants to figure out how to deal with the situation, how best to respond to the needs of their loved one, where should they turn to? What are the resources out there?
In Dementia Singapore, we have a training program, a very basic training program that teach caregiver about dementia, about the progression of dementia and then different type of dementia, how to communicate with a person with dementia. Even before that, they teach about person-centered care approach, and then understand the impact of dementia on the person with dementia and on the caregiver, and how to engage the person with dementia in activities, and what are the community resources available to support caregiver. So if the caregiver can, even not in Dementia Singapore, in other service provider have such courses, I do encourage caregiver to quickly go and get familiar with dementia and then acquire the skills to better care for their loved one.
And could you describe how these courses play out? Are they like a one session course, 1 week course? What sort of courses are these?
It really depends. There are free online courses, but online courses is very theoretical. You learn about dementia, but you don't get a chance to practice. In Dementia Singapore, we have Foundation Person-Centered Care. I think it's a 4 days course. 4 days course to learn about. It's a skill-based course. You really learn how to communicate, how to conduct activities, and all these things. And then also you talk to each other, and there are these courses that is quite important for caregivers.
Stephen, we were talking about the stresses that caregivers go through. What forms of support are there? I mean, you spoke about the courses that caregivers can undertake to care for people with dementia. But what about the challenges and stresses that the caregivers are going through? Is there any support network for them?
Actually, there are quite a lot of support for the caregivers, because we know ultimately the ability to be to be in the community need to rely on the caregiver. So if caregiver is not able to provide the support, that's it, the institutionalization will happen. So they are in Dementia Singapore, we do have quite a lot of caregiver support. We have, for example, caregiver support group almost every Saturday, whether it's online or in person. We have caregiver support group sessions where we invite experts to come to speak on various topics for the first hour, and then caregiver will break up into smaller groups where they share about their caring experience. And this is very important because not only they learn about certain condition or certain from the experts, but they also build the informal network that they don't need to rely always on the support services, the doctors, the nurses, but then they can always rely on each other for tips, even for listening ears. Actually, those are very crucial support, informal support. And then we talk about training for caregivers, which is quite critical. And we also run caregiver support network, where we bring caregiver into the same space to do an activity, for example, guitar lesson, but then we encourage them to mingle among themselves to build that sense of camaraderie. They are having the quote and unquote same problem, the looking after their loved one. We know that it's not easy. So hopefully although it's activity based, we hope that they form this informal network. And we have a lot of resources. We have a dementia hub that consists of locally curated dementia information, how to communicate, how to support their loved one. Recently when there was an election, and we did an article on how to support the person with dementia in the voting process. And the caregiver can go to this resource portal to take a look and then learn about different things, but it's very localized in the Singapore context. On top of that, actually government also have a lot of schemes, financial schemes, like for example, if the disability is very severe on the person with dementia, caregiver can apply for Pioneer Disability Assistance Scheme, and then there is this caregiver training grant that is available for caregiver to get some subsidy in taking up training courses. And there is this I can't remember the name, but then if they are, it's means tested, if they are at certain bracket of the income bracket, they actually can get some caregiver, I can't remember the name, but the government will give them some incentive on a monthly basis for their caregiving role, which is quite helpful as a caregiver. So there is quite a lot of incentive, and then program like dementia daycare. Dementia daycare, although we take in person with dementia, caregiver also stand to benefit because it's respite for caregiver. Can you imagine 24 hours looking after their loved one who is wandering or repeating themselves or wanting to go out, but then in the daytime, at least for about 6 to 8 hours, when the loved one with dementia is in a dementia daycare center, caregiver can take a breather. And there's various programs as such that to support caregiver to lessen their caregiving load.
So the dementia daycare would involve the person with the condition going in for a few hours a day. Is that how it works out?
Yeah. I think at least 5 to 7 hours a day. That is quite good respite.
Yes. I guess one of the things that apart from the caregivers, apart from giving them the tools of how to care for their loved ones, they also need some recognition of the challenges that they are facing, right? It's difficult to deal with anxiety and memory loss as well. So these initiatives and programs are clearly very important.
Correct.
Stephen, you've been working in this field for 20 years. You've seen the level of awareness grow. This is where you've contributed to the awareness growing as well. But I have to ask, is there stigma still in Singapore associated with dementia?
I think there is, especially for the person with dementia themselves and the caregivers. I spoke to this caregiver, and then this caregiver, the husband is diagnosed with dementia, young onset dementia, in fact. And then this caregiver told me that, hey, Stephen, I don't like to have visitor coming to my house because every time they come to my house, I feel that I'm being judged. I feel that they are looking at my husband and then want to see how far that he has deteriorated. And that's why, he feel that, as even the husband is diagnosed with dementia, as a caregiver, they feel that the society is judging her. So there is the stigma is very real. And then we did survey, mass survey, and then although the stigma has improved, but there is still the public still think that there is a stigma for a person with dementia, because there are also some misconception. They thought that dementia is aggressive. And then dementia is not able to make decision. Not only among the public, sometimes professionals. Once the person is diagnosed with dementia, that's it. You cannot make decision on your own. But at the very early stage of dementia, the person is still capable. Yeah.
So, what is your recommendation? How can we build dementia-friendly communities, dementia-supportive communities?
Yeah. So that's why a lot of outreach to members of the public, a lot of education, not about the 4 days course, but just awareness course. What is dementia? The myth about dementia, and all this will be helpful for the member of the public to understand a little bit more about dementia. And then beyond that, we can even rally member of the public to play a role in supporting person with dementia. For example, we have this membership program called Kara, and then it's an app, and then the person with dementia will be issued a card, and then there is this safe return function. We try to reach out to person with dementia to sign up, caregiver to sign up, also member of the public to sign up. So once the person with dementia, some people with dementia, they are still wandering in the community. They are still relatively independent, but you never know when the person lose their way and then go missing, right? So this app will have a notification to everybody that, please keep a lookout at Mr. Lim, who is wearing white polo t-shirt and green short sleeve, last found in Bedok Interchange. So then through this kind of initiative like Kara, and then reaching out to the member of the public, we can build a more dementia inclusive society that everybody can come together and then support person with dementia, because this is not only a problem faced by the person or the caregiver. Next time, dementia is so prominent that the society have to come together to support and then build a dementia-friendly society.
Stephen, on that note, I thank you for taking the time to join us today for this conversation. I'm sure, like me, many listening in have probably got a much better perspective on dementia and how to deal with this condition, but also the challenges that the caregivers face. So thank you for your time.
I'm happy. Thank you for having me in the program.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching our podcast. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and spread the word.